In the first third of my long career, I was a disc jockey and program director at a dozen different radio stations. Program director at 9 of them, and I was on the air as a disc jockey in all but, in all but 2, I think. Milwaukee, I wasn't on the air. In New Haven, I was not on the air. The other places I was, I could list them, but not important. The thing is that each one of those jobs, I really only had one competitor, if that, and that was the other station in my format. So like in Milwaukee, there were, 20 stations, say. I was top 40 station. There was only one other top 40 station in the market, and that's the one that I had to beat. The program director's job was to be the number one station in his format. Urban, oldies, country. You had to be number one in your format first, and then you went on to be as high in the overall ratings as you possibly could be in hopes of beating all the other formats and being number one, baby. And that's what we were trying to do. Now, I say that to say this. You got to identify yourself. People listen to the radio all the time, but it is astounding the number of people who cannot tell you the name of the radio station they are listening to. The problem was really compounded when the Arbitron rating system came out. It took over for a telephone rating system called C.E. Hooper, which was, well, I can talk about that later, but it was a very accurate rating system, I believe. Arbitron comes out, and people are required to write down every station that they're listening to if they participate properly. And I got a real eye-opener on that the first time I went to review those diaries in Beltsville, Maryland. And I discovered my station was getting the short end of the stick because of call letter confusion. My station was WAV Victor Z, and just down the road, I was in New Haven, Connecticut, just down the road is the biggest top 40 radio station in the world, WABC. Now say that quickly, WABC, WABZ, WABZ, WABC, right? I saw in the diaries where people wrote down the name of one of my disc jockeys that they were listening to and then wrote WABC, and I didn't get credit for that diary. And the sample is so small that, well, what happened in that first book under that system that I saw was my numbers dropped a point and a half. Bad for a new PD. Fortunately, they came back a year later, but by then I'd been fired for some other reason. I can tell you about that later. Now, back to my topic. You cannot identify your radio station too much. You have to over-identify your radio station if you're going to stick in people's minds, if they're going to remember what they were listening to. Even if they're enjoying it, they're going to forget it unless you imprint it in their heads. First consultant, and I'll talk about him some more as this little series goes on. The very first radio consultant was a guy named Mike Joseph. Mike began a career as a programming consultant, the very first one, in 1955. He just did top 40 radio. He was very, very strictly formatted, and he just about always won. And he over-identified the radio stations to the extent that us radio guys could hardly stand listening to his radio stations, really, because it was so repetitive with the station name. Mike's last big station was in the 80s in Chicago, WBBM, the CBS-owned FM radio station. He called it B96. It was a high-energy top 40 radio station with a very small playlist. Disc jockeys had to say B96, which was their identifier, B96, at least 4 times every break. You came out of the record and said, B96, that was Elton John with that song. B96 temperature is this. B96 time is that. And the B96 weather is coming up. And into the spot break they went. Come out of the spot break. B96 promotion. B96 plays all the hits. This is B96. There's a jingle and into the song. WBBM FM's ratings doubled within 18 months. Even if you're on a smaller market and ratings competition is not quite so much a thing, you still have an immense amount of competition out there. Everything, just think about everything that's available on people's phones now. So you need to identify yourself with your community and overdo it.